Yeah, Dinesh DSouza in studio, the documentary Hillary's America, The Secret History of the Democratic Party. Lots of stuff in there. I grew up a Democrat and amongst very, very, very liberal people. So liberal that I remember watching the Academy Awards in like 1973 at my grandmother's house because she had a color TV. It was all la-di-da. And John Wayne came up there to present an award or something, and my grandma was like, "Get this putz off the stage." And I'm like, "That's a Duke. That's John Wayne. What are you yelling?" And she just went, "I don't like his politics." Oh. This is 1973. So this is what I grew up in, and I drank all the Kool-Aid. I just assumed the Republicans invented the KKK and any voter suppression stuff and any racism stuff and any of that stuff was just sort of all Republican stuff, and all the good, happy, progressive, let's get women the right to vote and let's do away with slavery and all that. I thought, that's the Democrats. Those are the nice people.
Well, the funny thing for me, Adam, is that I actually got the same story, but from the Republican side. And here's what I mean. I came as an immigrant in the 70s. I kind of caught the Reagan bug in the early 80s. I was a young Reaganite. But then remember, Reagan says, I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me. And what I got out of that was, hey, these Democrats are great guys. They have a great history, but just kind of somewhat recently, maybe in the 60s or the McGovern campaign in the 70s, they went off the track. But I think as I've begun to research the party for not only the movie, but a book that goes with it, same title, I discovered, wait a minute, there's a whole sordid tradition here that goes back to even the early days of slavery in the early 19th century. This party has a lot to answer for, but it has been super clever about covering up its tracks.
Perfect. I mean, it's literally politics. It's literally a campaign, like this notion, just the whole thing. I'm there for you. I got your back. I'm fighting for you. No one ever steps back and goes, how are these groups that you're fighting for? How well are they doing since you started fighting for them? I don't think they're doing very well.
So here's a really creepy thought. I mean, when I think about life on the plantation, the old slave plantation, and remember, the Democrats were the party of slavery. They didn't invent slavery, but what they invented was the justification for slavery. Slavery is a really good idea. It's really good not only for the master, it's good for the slave. Because why? Free accommodations. Free health care. Your kid gets sick. He's not really working 8 hours a day, but we still call the doctor. We give you a basic standard of living. It may be meager, but it's better than nothing. Now, today, fast forward 150 years, if you walk around Oakland, inner city Detroit, even Dallas, people talk about the Dallas shootings and what motivated the shooter. But I step back and I go, a lot of these inner cities are really bad places to live. And in fact, they kind of resemble the old plantation in notable ways. Number one, ramshackle housing. Number two, there's no sustainable family structure. Everyone's illegitimate. No one's looking after anyone. Third, you have this sort of meager provision. People are supposed to be climbing out of poverty, but no one seems to ever actually get there. We spend trillions of dollars to get rid of poverty, and these places are pretty much the same as they were 50 years ago.
I don't get the disconnect, and I also I don't get the part where somebody who's voting, who doesn't have a lot, and somebody gets on the stump of the Apple box and says, I'm going to get that guy to give up money, and we're going to kick it down to you. How you even think that A, that's going to happen, and B, it's going to work, or C, it's going to be good for you in your life, because it's never worked. It's never going to work. Taking money out of your pocket and kicking it down, it's not going to work, even if they did, but they don't. It goes somewhere else. I mean, the whole foundation was an insane part of this documentary as well. But let's start from the start. Well, let's start from the start. The start of the documentary is you in prison.
Yep.
And tell us why you ended up there and how you ended up there and what you did wrong.
Well, what I did wrong was a college friend of mine was running for the U.S. Senate, and I gave her $20,000 of my own money, more than the campaign finance law specifies. So the campaign finance law says you can give 10 grand. I gave 30 grand, and the way I did it was I told two of my friends, hey, you like her? Give her 10 grand and I'll reimburse you. Now, you can't do that. That's exceeding the campaign finance law. But no American has ever gone to prison or been locked up for doing this without some corruption, without something to gain. It wasn't like I was trying to buy a judgeship or become ambassador to the Bermuda or get something out of it. I didn't even tell the candidate I was doing it.
Right.
So normally when this happens is they take you to the Federal Election Commission, you get a fine, you get 100 hours of community service, and off you go. In my case, I had 12 FBI agents reading my books, going through my tax returns, looking at all my bank statements. So they went after me hammer and tongs, and I got an 8-month overnight confinement, community service, a fine, and so that was my penance for my sins.
And you believe most of that was motivated by 2016, Obama's America, the documentary you did before?
Well, number one, Obama himself was railing about the documentary on his website, BarackObama.com. So I know I know the documentary ticked him off. So let's start with that. Number two, he's kind of a vindictive guy. Number three, Eric Holder's running the Justice Department. And number four, like I say, at the same time, look, there was a guy named Chutwal, Asian Indian guy like me, but he gave $180,000 in straw donations to Hillary and a whole bunch of Democratic candidates. He goes before a federal judge in New York. No prison, no confinement. So,
well, here's what I want to tell everyone about the government. Could it work any other way? Could it work any other way? If somebody had made a scathing documentary about you and your wife or your life or your work here on the show, right, and at some point you got to be in charge, and
there'll be some investigations.
The people around you were people that you hired, essentially, who looked out for you and understood that you were the guy who did the hiring. And then at some point, some guy from some newspaper that wrote some really bad review of your podcast came in front of a judge. Of course he's going to get the maximum whatever. And of course, the guy who gave you 5-star reviews all the way through, if that guy comes in front of a judge, just give him time served and a little community service. Of course, that's how we're wired. I mean, it's weird that everyone goes, I can't believe this. Of course. This is the only way it's going to work. This is why I don't like the big government. And this takes place all over the world. Now, Stalin would just have you killed. He would have your entire family killed. Right. That's it. Look, you could talk crap or not talk crap. Maybe you just heard you talk crap and he'd have you killed. This is a much lesser version of that, but it's still how humans are wired.
Vengeance.
It's how we're wired. It's not even, I don't even look at it as vengeance. Like, honestly, it's just like, hey, that guy's talking. I had a neighbor. One guy I liked, the other guy I hated. And when that guy's house caught on fire, I didn't call 911 because I hated the guy.
Well, this is why I consider myself one of the stupider criminals in the history of jurisprudence. And it's because you make a movie, you go after Obama, and of course, I didn't just go after his ideas. I mean, I was in Hawaii, Indonesia, Kenya. I was at the family homestead. I interviewed his brother in the Huruma slum of Nairobi. I ticked him off. I got into his world. And so I should have known there's a big, target on my back. And so for the slightest thing, if I gave him any ammunition, they were going to turn around and use it against me. Now, what I've done with this movie is I've taken my experience, and rather than complain about it, I'm like, what can I learn from it? How can I take the lemon, make some lemonade, get some new insights into American politics? I don't normally hang out with hoodlums, sleep in bunk beds at my age, but I'm forced to do it, so maybe I'll learn something from it.
So you did, was it about 8 months?
8 months in overnight confinement. Interestingly, I was not in a white-collar prison. I was in a confinement center where the whole gamut of criminals, drug smugglers, armed robbers, rapists, the whole gamut. So I got to actually interact with mostly Hispanic guys who had done all kinds of stuff.
Isn't it the guys on the left and Obama and everyone else who never stop beating the drum of people being unjustly incarcerated?
Sure.
And we need room for people that actually commit violent crimes, not the petty stuff or the white collar, the drug stuff or whatever. Could there be anything more innocuous than giving money to somebody's campaign in terms of people who don't need to be taken off the street?
Right.
I mean, fine, you screwed up. Pay a fine. Here's your community hours. Go. You're a smart guy. You have incredible education. Go down to the inner city school, and every day for a few hours, you got to teach mathematics to some impoverished kids. Like that, I get. But the argument that they make up against using up prison beds, Could there be a better one than Dinesh D'Souza in terms of guys who don't need to sleep in a prison overnight?
This is how they see it. They see it, if we let this Dinesh D'Souza guy stay in his own house and stay in his own bed, he's probably going to make a movie about Hillary Clinton and release it right in the year of the election. To us, it sounds like a great idea to have this guy taken out of commission. It's a very valuable use of government property. So, yeah.
So there you go. And the movie starts off with you and you're in the joint. Yes, Brian.
Can I ask one question about that? Because the question I had is there any part of you, you mentioned having a big target on your back after making the Obama movie. Is there any part of you that is kind of like, I knew that risk going in, and that's kind of that's what ended up happening? Because if I egg the principal's house, you know what I mean? There's the one guy who can get me in trouble, give me detention, whatever it is, or suspend me. I know that's definitely a road that could go down. That's a road that.
Yeah, he just said he was the dumbest.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is true. I think in a way I was foolish in handing them a truncheon with which to beat me. Look, we don't live in Stalinist Russia. They can't just grab me off the street and stick me in prison for nothing. So they needed to have a pretext. The reason I think what they did was unjust is because justice isn't just a matter of did you break the law, but hey, does the penalty fit the crime? Mm-hmm. The other guys who did the same thing get roughly the same penalty. If one guy gets 5 years for speeding, another guy gets $100 fine, that's not fair. So that's my complaint, selective prosecution and selective justice.
Do you assume you're on the radar and let's just say Dawson over there did the exact same thing you did? Would they even know?
No, they wouldn't know.
Your name had to come up and make a little chime noise when it popped up on the computer, right?
Yeah, there's no easy way to know because the truth of it is these straw donations are quite common. I spoke to Alan Dershowitz, the Harvard lawyer, and he goes, this is actually routine in politics. A partner in a law firm wants to, please the candidate. They tell all the guys in the firm, hey guys, I'll steer some business your way. All of you give $5,000 to my favorite kid. This happens all the time. It's widespread in politics.
There's a tax version of it where you get a whatever, you don't have to claim this and that and pay taxes on school. And it's like, okay, well, I'll send your kid to college and you send my kid to college later or whatever. There's a million versions of this with taxes where it's just dudes with money trying to hang on to a little of it or trying to give it away, but it goes on a million times a second in this country.
So the FBI director was asked, how did you catch this D'Souza guy? How did this happen? It's very odd. It's a small amount of money.
Was this Comey?
This wasn't Comey. Okay. This was the regional director, and he goes, we were conducting a routine review. Well, interestingly, this routine review yields a single offender, me. No one else, the net didn't get anybody else apparently. So it's all a little suspect. But hey, that's a bygone. The way I look at it is I learned a few things in there that I would not have learned otherwise. It's actually given me a kind of grittier, more realistic view of politics, because I think before I was too pointy-headed. I sort of looked at American politics. It's a debate between this set of ideals and this set of ideals, and I didn't see the fact that human beings are motivated by greed, lust, acquisitiveness, hatred, envy, fear, and that these motives are a big part. The criminals know this. This is how they see life. And I tended to omit these motives in politics and just look at what people said. We believe in liberty. They believe in equality. Blah, blah, blah. But now I look at both the ideals as well as the kind of low motives that also drive human politics.
There was a couple of moments that really stood out to me is a guy who just sort of studies human beings. Gary, you might be able to find it online. That I got the copy, I watched it, and then it expired. So we have a couple of clips, but we can't find all this. He was speaking to... He was sitting down with Steve Croft, I think, from 60 Minutes, doing this got to be, in the White House, so it's X amount of years ago. And after the whole scandal and everything, and Steve, he said to him and Hillary, they're just sitting down doing an interview. It's in Dinesh's movie. And he says, so you guys have sort of worked things out. You're staying together. And it's so funny. He's kind of telling. He went, you have an arrangement. Like it's a weird thing to say to a couple, but I think Steve, who's probably on the inside, knew more than you would know. Wow. Like, cause you'd go, it's good that you and Tammy got back together and you're thinking of the kids and back in love again or something or whatever. And he went, you've got an arrangement. And Bill did this move. And right before it has to, sometimes things.
He tugged on his collar and went,
hot in here.
Sometimes things take, more than one to sort of penetrate your mind. It was the clip right before it was Bill Clinton going, I did not have sex with that woman. Like he just was looking right down the camera and he was moving his hand, and it's like, oh my God, this guy's a sociopath. Like, he's able to do this. And the next thing was that Steve Croft interview, and he like stopped Steve and he went like, this is not an arrangement. We are in love. We have a marriage. It's the most.
This is a very different thing.
This is a very different thing. And it's like, wait a minute, you're just banging strangers all the time. Like, but that was the point in the documentary, because we're all just who we are. Like, oh, Bill Clinton, he's playing the saxophone. I love that guy. Guy's cool. He's funny.
Yeah.
He eats at McDonald's and he jogs, you know. That's that point where like, oh yeah, this guy grew up in a single family with weird alcoholic stepdads and stuff. This guy's a sociopath. He should be. He didn't grow up in any kind of environment where there was any stability or anything. He had to learn this trick early and often to get where he is.
I think also the Hillary side of that equation is often not looked at, because we always think, okay, here's Bill, he's on the rampage, and Hillary is the suffering wife. So this is like in the old days on the slave plantation, where the slave master would take up with some of the slaves, there'd be a couple of mulatto children running around, and the poor wife would have to endure. Now, I think with Hillary, this is not the case. Bill Clinton actually had a big episode in Oxford when he first met Hillary, where he was accused of raping a co-ed, right? So here comes Bill to Hillary, and from the early days, going back to Arkansas, his campaign managers would give him would give Hillary lists of these women. So Hillary has known from the beginning. So what's going on here with Hillary? In my opinion, what's going on with Hillary is that she recognized early on, I need Bill, right? Bill is my pitch man. Bill has charm. I don't have charm. So we have to go as a twosome. But this is a very risky proposition, because Bill can walk out on me anytime. He can go elsewhere. He can find a cuter. So Hillary's thing was, how do I hold Bill? How do I link him to me so he can never get away? And I think Hillary realized, I've got to play a role in his life that nobody else can play, so that he can swap from one woman to the other, but he'll be dependent on me for life. And I think this is where in the movie and in the book we try to break some new ground in understanding this twisted arrangement called the Clinton marriage.
I think you have the clip, not from the movie. Gary was just able to run it down. What year is it from?
92, I think.
92. All right, we can take a listen. It's kind of comical now when you hear it with all the context. But anyway,
so just to give it a little context, at the time of this clip, he's Governor Clinton. This is during the Jennifer.
Oh, this is not after.
This is during the Jennifer
January.
Flowers.
He has dark
thing.
hair.
This is another incident. Okay, sorry. Thought it was a Monica Lewinsky thing.
I think most Americans would agree that it's very admirable that you have stayed together, that you've worked your problems out, that you seem to have reached some sort of an understanding and an arrangement.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. You're looking at two people who love each other. This is not an arrangement or an understanding. This is a marriage. That's a very different thing.
Wow.
You know, I'm not sitting here.
You can see that's sociopathy right there. Like, he's just lying. I mean, that's an insane. So that is wow. Like, I remember just seeing that. At the time, it was probably cool, but now it's like, whoa, and he's shaking his head and he's getting indignant. And also, he's doing what you should do in his position, which is always being on the offense.
Yep.
He's never, it's like, he's going to correct this guy.
Yeah, don't let the moment pass. Like, jump on it.
We're only here because you're banging somebody other than your wife. You do understand why we're talking to you. It's because you're banging this other person that you're not married to, and you're getting indignant? Like, hold on, slow your roll. What'd you say? You never bring it up. Like,
well, you know, I think...
What are you calling me? It's like, you have sex with everybody all the time, and you're getting offended that the reporter who knows this brought that up. And Steve said arrangement. Like, it was funny, like, Steve's like, kind of knew what was going on.
You know, I think what these
from
guys...
92, Gary?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Jennifer Flowers
That's
scandal.
a long... I mean, the point is...
that was from that.
Yeah.
Steve Croft from 60 Minutes knew about the arrangement a long time ago, is sort of
24
what
years.
I'm saying. Yeah.
You know, it's a rule of politics that a lot of people who are not very political don't follow these things closely. They just look to the emotion of the person speaking. So if Bill Clinton seems indignant and outraged and sort of righteously inflamed, they feel, well, gee, he must have a point. They've obviously upset him. So he realizes that's more important to convey than any facts of the situation about which most people have no idea.
Right.
It's worked like a charm. I mean, it's worked really. Even when he does it, like, I did not have sex with that woman, and then it just comes back to he did. It still it doesn't slow his roll that much. It's a little speed bump, but like the moral of the story is why not just do it all the time with everything? It never really gets in the way. People aren't listening.
Well, this is why I think this FBI kind of giving Hillary a pass is so bad, is because the Clintons are getting the message that nothing can stop you. You can do whatever you want. None of the rules apply to you. So now, the last we heard, Hillary was basically renting out American foreign policy. Now, we have to pause for a moment because no one's ever done that before. We've had local corruption in America, Tammany Hall, the local mob boss in New York is looting the Treasury, or the Daily Racket in Chicago, but we've never had someone who is going to foreign governments and foreign corporations and going, you want a mineral contract over here? The State Department has to approve it. Pay my husband Bill $750,000 to give a 20-minute speech, and after I deliver the mineral contract to you, $30 million to the Clinton Foundation. This kind of transaction, and there are many of them. We talk about two notorious ones in the movie, but there are dozens of these things going back over many years. So the
plutonium one was pretty eye-opening to me.
Pretty eye-opening.
And I don't think most people are aware of that. But it's funny because we were sitting here with Christopher Darden and Garrigus a couple days ago. I was telling you guys this, and they're just sitting there, and we're saying, both of them just said, it's so insane. Like Darden was insane because Darden was like, we laid out all this evidence, and then you just go talk to the jurors, and because when you're done with the trial, you can listen this Saturday on Reasonable Doubt. But when you're done with the trial, part of the deal is the lawyers go talk to the jurors and go, what'd you learn? How'd I do? How can we fix this? What can I modify? What were you feeling? Because you're sitting there the whole time trying to figure out what the people are thinking. And then they always tell you something insane, like, I heard about the DNA, but I just knew in my heart he wasn't guilty. Like stuff like that. And like these people are incensed because they have these crazy educations. They spend all this time and have all these experts and do all this legwork. And at the end of the day, you're just talking to someone who drives a milk truck going, I know what I know. He wasn't guilty.
How could someone with that smile do anything like that?
And the American people are sort of that way, too. Like, we just don't have time to get into all this stuff. And Bill seems really sincere.
I think this is also human nature is a little this way. In other words, we're creatures of intellect, but we also have emotion. And our emotion very often frames the way our intellect even sees things. It's the lens through which the picture is made. This is why I do movies. I was a think tank guy writing books, giving speeches for many years. And then I realized that at the end of the day, you don't sway someone just by changing their mind. You also have to get them to sort of feel a certain way. And the beauty of the movies is they enable you to do that. You can reach the heart as much as the mind, and you engage all the senses, the eyes, the ears. So at the end of a 90-minute movie, you come out and you're a little bit transformed if it's a really good movie.
Yes, Gina.
So I know that this focuses on Hillary, and it makes sense, especially when you talk about the emails and everything and Obama. But have you noticed in your experience that once you get to a certain level of government, it doesn't matter what party you claim to be affiliated with, you're just kind of a scumbag? Or do you think this really does split the line between Republican and Democrat?
Well, there is a degree to which anyone in politics has access to an unguarded trough of money, and that is the federal treasury. This $3 trillion comes in, right? It's a big stack of dough. And these guys get to spend it. And they didn't earn a penny of it. They've extracted it from us by force. It now sits in a big fat pile. And so a lot of them, their grubby little paws are very tempted. I grant that that's like a universal principle of politics. Now, that being said, I do think that the Democrats as a party have organized themselves as the party of building the trough and putting their hands in it. Now, historically, the Republicans have done a lot to block that. Now, take slavery. We mentioned it earlier, but slavery is a form of stealing, right? If you can get another guy to work for you for free and don't have to pay him except keep him alive, that's a pretty good deal for you as an employer. And so slavery was a form of ripping off other people's labor for centuries. The Democrats were all for it. And then when the slavery racket ended, they came up with other rackets to do the same thing. So my point is, I think at the end of the day, yes, all politicians are tempted by corruption, but we do have one party that is sort of officially the party of theft, and that's the Democratic Party, surprisingly. And we have one party that has done important things to stop them and can do it again.
I'd like to hear the plutonium thing. It's a very interesting story, and it's one of those like where you just sit around and go, oh, yeah, ooh, boy, what are we doing here? But again, I have this feeling of it's the same feeling I have of when you lend a friend or family member money, and at some point you get to a year later, they haven't paid you back a penny, and they're calling you an asshole at Thanksgiving. And I sort of go, could it go any other way? And I just sort of have this way with politics, left and right, which is put the money in a trough, let them be in charge of where it gets spent and how much of it gets spent on them, or how much golf they want to play, or what do they want to use Air Force One for, or whatever. And it's very quickly going to spin out into something that we don't want it to be. It's nearly impossible for that not to happen. That's why I just would like to shrink the government. That's my plan.
There's no question about that. I mean, I think that, historically in America, presidents, though, have not sought that office to make money. Some of them were already rich, like Kennedy and FDR. Others were not rich, like Jimmy Carter, but no one would accuse Jimmy Carter of, running for the presidency to add to his pile of cash.
No.
And no one thought that of Reagan. No one thought that of Bush, however much you didn't like Bush. You can call these guys buffoons or whatever, but they actually weren't they weren't on the make. The Clintons, I think, have been on the make since day one.
Well, I think you must know about his background, but his background is sort of shocking, and it's also like...
Who's he?
Clinton.
Okay, Bill Clinton.
You're calling Hillary a man?
Oh,
Brian.
I asked the question. We're all wondering.
Of the Clintons, right. Yeah. He grew up in a thing that is, as somebody who studies psychology and has done Loveline for for a million years, you can't grow up, you can't be anything other. I mean, actually, it's probably better that he's doing this and not killing people, because if his background is insane, his story, his family story and everything. Gary, find out what you can find out, but Dinesh, you probably know what you need to know about Bill Clinton, right, and his background? Oh,
sure. Well, Bill's had a ramshackle background. I mean, he just essentially grew up, I don't know, white trash is the right term, but he essentially grew up in a messed up situation. Now, what's interesting about Hillary is that she, too, from a young age, they're both pathological liars. And they lie about things that it's not important to lie about. Hillary goes, I've been named after the great climber Sir Edmund Hillary, who conquered Everest. Well, it turns out Edmund Hillary hadn't climbed Everest when Hillary was born. So he wasn't really famous then, and it's very unlikely she was named after him. So why do that? Why is this even necessary? But it's, this is how these people are. They just say stuff, and then, and they don't apologize. Their idea, and I have to admire them a little for this in politics, their tenacity is unbelievable. When the Jennifer Flowers thing came, I thought, Bill Clinton's like a man who's been shot up. This guy's done. We're not going to be hearing from him again. There he's in the White House. Hillary, too, she puts her head down, she marches ahead, and she dares us to jump on her, bludgeon her to the ground. We have to sit on her, otherwise she's going to get up and keep moving.
I want to know the plutonium story. First, I will tell you about Stamps.com. Now, these guys, hardworking, honest, pay their taxes. Stamps.com. Buy and print official U.S. That's right, not Hungarian, U.S. postage. Any letter, any package comes right out of your computer. Instantly comes right out of the printer. Just stick it on the package, and we use it here. We use it for everything all the time, and it's been years, and it's so convenient. Plus, you get discounts you can't get at the post office. I got a special offer right now. Use my name, Adam. Get a 4-week trial. $110 bonus offer. Includes a digital scale and postage. Go to Stamps.com. Before you do anything else, click the microphone, top of the home page, type in Adam. Stamps.com. Enter Adam. Okay, Dinesh, give us the plutonium story, which I found pretty fascinating.
So there's a Canadian billionaire named Frank Giustra, buddy of Bill Clinton. And Frank Giustra has his eye on huge uranium contracts in an obscure country, Kazakhstan, run by a dictator. So Giustra's been trying to get these contracts, can't get them. So he goes to Bill and goes, Bill, you need to step in. Giustra and Bill fly to Kazakhstan. Bill schmoozes the dictator, says all kinds of preposterous things like he's a model of human rights and all nonsense. Anyway, the dictator's really pleased because this human rights thing is big with these guys. They don't want to come under war crimes commissions and things. So
with plutonium, because it can be weaponized.
And he's got all this uranium. So he gives the uranium deal to Bill Clinton. Now, then Frank Giustra turns around and writes a $31 million check to the Clinton Foundation. But that's only a down payment, because the moment the deal comes through, all kinds of people associated with the deal pour over $100 million into the Clinton Foundation. But
we got a picture of him there.
On the uranium deal alone, Frank Giustra makes over $300 million. So on the one hand, you think these guys are doing favors for the Clintons, but the truth of it is they're raking in a lot more than they ever give. So the Clintons are basically taking a 30% commission on global deals that net hundreds of millions of dollars.
And then later on, it came time to sell.
Later on, it comes time to sell. Giustra wants to cash out, and so what happens is a buyer steps in. Well, who's the buyer? The Russian government. The Russian government buys this company. Now, it's one thing for them to have uranium deals in Kazakhstan, but they start buying all these uranium assets in the United States, and they control them to this day. So suddenly, we now have like a national security question. This is not just a matter of lining your pockets. You're taking U.S. national security and putting it in the hand of someone who's not exactly friendly to us, Vladimir Putin.
That's why it drives me nuts when these guys are up on the pulpit talking about the big fat cats paying their fair share and we're tired of the 1%ers and all that stuff. You are that. You hang with that. You make them rich. It's insane that you, again, whatever the lie is, you just keep repeating it, and everyone's the 99% that doesn't have the access that you have. They don't get it.
But they're not afraid people will find out, because that's pretty egregious.
But who's got time? Like, that's the whole point. Everyone's staring into their smartphone.
People don't find out. A lot of the press covers for the Clintons because they feel that the alternative is terrible. So they actually do unpaid service, so to speak. So the Clintons have to rely. They know that they're generally protected. Even when the Clinton Cash book came out and made a stir, it was a one-day story in the New York Times. Now, had it been Romney or the Republicans, they'd be covering this every day for months.
I like. This is why I kind of liked Bernie Sanders, which is I disagreed with all his plans pretty much, but I did feel like you got what you got. Like, at least Bernie was Bernie. Like, it's at the point with politicians where we're just looking for sincerity. It's not even, is the tax plan good or not? It's just, at least he believes it.
And I think his success, at least the degree he had success, was that some Democrats, to their credit, felt kind of dirty about supporting Hillary. Because here's Bernie. Bernie's a bit outlandish. I mean, I call him Rip Van Sanders. He's sleeping on his neighbor's couch for 20 years, So this guy wakes up. It's the 21st century. Normally, he wouldn't have the support he did. But I think some Democrats felt, you know what, at least he's honest. He might be a nincompoop, but at least he's straight. He's not ripping us off. And so his idealism is admirable, even if we don't entirely agree with it.
Yeah, and maybe there's an opening for that brand of politician in the future. I mean, maybe the first guy to really kind of crack it. I mean, there's always been guys out there being an alternative, but they didn't really get a groundswell underneath them. There's always been the weirdo sort of Naders and Ross Perot's and guys like that. But Bernie hung in and moved the needle a little bit. I don't know if this... What I'm saying is maybe we're not ready in 2016, but maybe in 2020 or 24, there could be one of these guys.
Well, and also I think as you push to the left end of the spectrum and you push on the right end of the spectrum, you start discovering some interesting... There's a circle here. There's some similarities. There are things that Trump says that appeal to the Bernie guys. When Trump bashes the system and says, you're all in it together, Republicans and Democrats, and that the working class guys gotten ignored and globalization is shafting everyone, the Bernie guys go, well, that's kind of true. That's kind of true. That's kind of true. So what's interesting to see is will our politics shape in such a way that there are candidates who can now appeal to some of the Trump constituency, but also some of the Bernie constituency?
We got news to go.
Can I ask one more question?
Yep.
This is sort of for everyone, just because my childlike brain in this just doesn't understand how, when we have someone like Bernie who was so popular, and we had Republican candidates that people were super into, how did we end up with the two, I mean, I guess most loved, depending on who you talk to, but the two most hated candidates we could possibly have, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump?
Well, in this case, the two parties, they both wavered and they both flirted with the outside guy. And the Republicans decided, shoot, let's just go with the outside guy. We'll take a chance on the unknown because our guys are just way too pliant and they're way too pointy-headed, and at the end they always give into the system. Romney was an attractive candidate, but when Obama started pummeling him, he basically just stood up, put up both his hands and took it in the stomach. So the Republicans are like, we don't like that. We like the fact that Trump has fight in him. We're going to go with the unknown. The Democrats, at the end of the day, I think even though they flirted with Bernie, they're like, okay, Hillary's our hatchet woman. She'll get it done. She'll deliver the goods. We're going to go with her, and they have.
Okay.
Sort of reminds me of radio programmers, which is they'll go like, this guy's really funny, this guy's really fast on his feet, this guy's cracks everyone up, but this guy's got 25 years experience in Phoenix. He's got reps doing morning radio, and you go, yeah, but what about the fresh funny guy?
Yeah, the devil you know.
Yeah, but they will go with the guy who's got the reps over the guy who's funny, because even though that guy's funny, we're not sure if he's going to be funny all the way through for 4 hours a day, and is it going to be funny 3 years from now? And at least this guy, he's not that funny, but we know exactly what we're getting. We're playing it safe. We're going with this guy. Especially when the other guys are looking to hire the insane person from the Groundlings over there who doesn't have any radio experience. Now we're really going with the guys who have 25 years under their belt. Dinesh, tell me quickly about your background, because it's an interesting story, and I think people just know you and see you as this guy who makes these political documentaries. But walk us through your life a little bit.
Well, I grew up in a middle-class family in Bombay, India. I came to America because I believed it was the land of opportunity. And India, I felt India was too corrupt, India is a place where people go into politics to make money. India is a place where you have gangs running the place, a la Slumdog Millionaire. India is a place where you feel dirty at the end of the day because you've paid 4 people off just to get through the day. And so I thought, coming to America, there's a ladder of opportunity here. And the government has a role. It has to hold the ladder, protect property rights and stuff. But our job is to climb the ladder. And that's my politics. My politics comes out of the idea of how does a guy at the bottom move up the ladder. Hard work, creativity, entrepreneurship. You make a buck, you keep most of it. And so what I'm worried about with Obama, but even more with the Clintons, is that they believe in kind of the third world way of doing things. If I had to state Hillary's ambition, Obama's ambition, I think, is ideological. But Hillary's ambition, I think, is to sort of be the mob boss of the United States. She basically would like everyone to do her bidding. She feels like if that guy's against her, I want to be able to snuff him out without anybody really complaining. And the Clintons operate this way. They create these mafias. And even Democrats who cross them, their idea is that, Omerta, we had a vow of silence and you broke it, and we're done with you, and this kind of stuff. So it's making America into gangland, and this movie depicts that in a chilling way, and that's why I think the movie will be a bombshell in this election debate.
What's back to India? I was watching Vice, and they're showing all those kids at the train station just huffing glue and sleeping on the ground like 9-year-olds. Like, it was the most insane poverty you've ever seen in your life, because it was poverty mixed with drug addiction. And these kids would fall asleep with a rag soaked in this model glue that they were sucking on it like pacifiers, just sleeping on the ground, like painful poverty. Not, hey, we're poor, but we're proud. I got to walk to the well. In the middle of the train station.
Oh, yeah.
Insane. What is that? And it's so funny because if you're from North America, all the Indians you really know are your doctor, your dentist, and Dinesh D'Souza. So there's like, why are you guys sleeping on the ground with model glue in your mouth?
Well, that's because the immigrants who come here are the more entrepreneurial ones, the guys who are able to get across the pond, or 2 ponds in this case, come a long way. There's a lot of that kind of, I would call it, primeval poverty in India. There's a lot in Africa as well. The big story in India, though, is that India is getting better. India is actually moving in the kind of direction of the American dream. In other words, India used to have when I was in India, there was a very small middle class. So you had rich guys 1%, middle class 5%, everybody else poor. Now, rich guys 5%, middle class 20%, everyone else poor. So the poverty is the same, and there maybe has some new colorations and stuff, but by and large, it's the emergence of the middle class that's the big story. Those are guys climbing out of poverty. And India is today, I think, the most pro-American country in the world because the Indians basically want to be America circa 1950.
Do you think some of that is a lot of folks like yourself coming over here, finding success, getting in the news, or sharing the wealth, or sort of being exposed to this system?
I think that's part of it. I also think there are, of course, Indians like there are Mexicans who send money home and so on. But India's too big a country to be affected by that alone. It's got to be that I think what happened is that the Chinese started going the capitalist way. It's not that the Indians started reading Adam Smith or Hayek. They looked over their shoulder and they go, hey, that Chinese guy who used to go to the well to wash his clothes now has a washing machine. And he used to walk and now he has 2 cars. And so the Indians have decided to go the capitalist route that China has. Indians emphasizing more technology, whereas the Chinese emphasize manufacturing. But both countries have been doing pretty well the last 20 years. Coming up.
Well, I got to tell you, if you ever watch that, train station children thing, I believe it was on Vice, it'll just break your heart.
That sounds awful.
It's nauseating. It's just insane. For some reason, poverty set in rural whatever doesn't bother me. That's like people walking around looking for firewood and stuff like that. But when it's right in the middle of urban decay and it's kids and there's substance, the kind that eats at your frontal lobe, it's just the most depressing thing you could ever see. All right, let's get ready. Let's do some news.
Carolla.com.
Yeah, Dinesh DSouza in studio, the documentary Hillary's America, the Secret History of the Democratic Party. Lots of stuff in there. I grew up a Democrat and amongst very, very, very liberal people. So liberal that I remember watching the Academy Awards in 1973 at my grandmother's house because she had a color TV. It was all la-di-da. And John Wayne came up there to present an award or something, and my grandma was like, "Get this putz off the stage." And I'm like, "That's a Duke. That's John Wayne. What are you yelling?" And she just went, "I don't like his politics." Oh. This is 1973. So this is what I grew up in, and I drank all the Kool-Aid. I just assumed the Republicans invented the KKK and any voter suppression stuff and any racism stuff and any of that stuff was just sort of all Republican stuff, and all the good, happy, progressive, let's get women the right to vote. And it's literally politics. It's literally a campaign. This notion, just the whole thing. I'm there for you. I got your back. I'm fighting for you. No one ever steps back and goes, how are these groups that you're fighting for? How well are they doing since you started fighting for them? I don't think they're doing very well.
So here's a really creepy thought. I mean, when I think about life on the plantation, the old slave plantation, and remember, the Democrats were the party of slavery. They didn't invent slavery, but what they invented was the justification for slavery. Slavery is a really good idea. It's really good not only for the master, it's good for the slave. Because why? Free accommodations. Free health care. Your kid gets sick. He's not really working 8 hours a day, but we still call the doctor. We give you a basic standard of living. It may be meager, but it's better than nothing. Now, today, fast forward 150 years, if you walk around Oakland, inner city Detroit, even Dallas.
You in your life, because it's never worked. It's never going to work. Taking money out of your pocket and kicking it down, it's not going to work, even if they did, but they don't. It goes somewhere else. I mean, the whole foundation was an insane part of this documentary as well. But let's start from the start. Well, let's start from the start. The start of the documentary is you in prison.
Yep.
And tell us why you ended up there and how you ended up there and what you did wrong.
Well, what I did wrong was a college friend of mine was running for the U.S. Senate. And I gave her $20,000 of my own money, more than the campaign finance law specifies. So the campaign finance law says you can give 10 grand. I gave 30 grand. And the way I did it was I told 2 of my friends, hey, you like her? Give her 10 grand and I'll reimburse you. Now, you can't do that. That's exceeding the campaign finance law. But no American has ever gone to prison. Or, people talk about the Dallas shootings and what motivated the shooter. But I step back and I go, a lot of these inner cities are really bad places to live. And in fact, they kind of resemble the old plantation in notable ways. Number 1, ramshackle housing. Number 2, there's no sustainable family structure. Everyone's illegitimate. No one's looking after anyone. Third, you have this sort of meager provision. People are supposed to be climbing out of poverty, but no one seems to ever actually get there. We spent trillions of dollars to get rid of poverty, and these places are pretty much the same as they were 50 years ago.
I don't get the disconnect, and I also don't get the part where somebody who's voting, who doesn't have a lot, and somebody gets on the stump of the Apple box and says, I'm going to get that guy to give up money and we're going to kick it down to you. How you even think that A, that's going to happen, and B, it's going to work, or C, it's going to be good for it to do away with slavery and all that. I thought, that's the Democrats. Those are the nice people.
Well, the funny thing for me, Adam, is that I actually got the same story, but from the Republican side. And here's what I mean. I came as an immigrant in the 70s. I kind of caught the Reagan bug in the early 80s. I was a young Reaganite. But then remember, Reagan says, I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me. And what I got out of that was, hey, these Democrats are great guys. They have a great history, but just kind of somewhat recently, maybe in the 60s or the McGovern campaign in the 70s, they went off the track. But I think as I've begun to research the party for not only the movie but a book that goes with it, same title, I discovered, wait a minute, there's a whole sordid tradition here that goes back to even the early days of slavery in the early 19th century. This party has a lot to answer for, but it has been super clever about covering up its tracks.
Perfect. I mean, it's